Hello CIS110. One of the ways that I talked about using Excel within my previous career in the military was to use a feature called conditional formatting in order to draw attention to any criteria that was missed within our physical fitness test, which we refer to as our PT test. So what I wanted to do was create an example for you and actually show you how that works. So right here I have a make-believe PT data set here. And what I want to do before we get into formatting this is to actually make it a little bit more visible. And what I can do is right down here in the bottom right hand corner of your workbook, you'll see a sliding scale that says 100% next to it. We can use the minus right there or the plus to either decrease or increase in size, or we could use the sliding scale to decrease and increase in size. When we use the plus and minus, it brings us either up or down to the next 10% and then moves us 10% at a time. I'm just going to leave it at 150%. And then what I want to do is actually format this so that it looks a little bit more presentable as a set of data. What I would like to do for mine is to select my header cells, and I like to make them bold, and I align them to the center. And then of course I want my information to be visible, so I'm going to auto fit the column width. And that should look familiar from our assignments over the past couple weeks as well. And the last thing that I like to do as far as a formatting perspective is to select my entire data set and give this a border. And I can do that within the fonts command group and go to the borders drop down. And these are all the borders that are available to us. I'm going to click on all borders, and that is basically adding a border all around the border of every individual cell that I have selected. Now I can also select multiple different types of borders. If I were to go into just my headers and say that I want to give it maybe a thick bottom border or a bottom double border, that's a little bit of a tongue twister. I'm going to go with bottom double border, and you can see that it has actually kept all of the parts of the border that the bottom border isn't touching, and applying the new layer for the, or the new border rather, for the bottom of that. So now we have a data set that looks a little bit more presentable as a table, and that's the way that I like to format it. And now what I want to do is start figuring out who is either passing or who is failing our PT test. And the first step of that is to look at what our total score is. Chuck Norris obviously got a 100 in every category. So I can either put 300 here because it's very, very easy to see. But if I were to update this maybe next time, maybe he only got a 99 on the run that time, it's not going to update. So I want to use a formula for that. And actually, let me delete this one first. And I'm going to select going across, and I'm going to go +1 because that's where I want to actually drop my formula. I can click on the auto sum just like we did within our assignments, but you can see here that we can use auto sum to go across as well as up and down. And now I can also go and do that for here. I can select my range of data and click on auto sum. Or the cool thing that I can do is, because this is a relative formula, which means that the information in this cell will be relative to where our inputs are for here. So this is relative to that, this is relative to that, and that's going to drop it down. Knowing the terminology isn't as important. All that you really need to know is that when you use that little fill handle and drag it down, it's going to copy your formulas, and it's going to allow you to have all of these added rather quickly instead of having to do it one by one. Now, as we change anything within here, it's going to update within our total score. And that is a significant benefit. So now, in order to figure out who has passed and who has failed the PT test, the first thing that I want to do is take a look at our individual inputs. So in order to pass, you need to have at least a 60 in each of these events. So I'm going to select my events and then go to the Styles command group and conditional formatting. Now here I can use different types of formats. I can use highlight cell rules, I can use top and bottom rules. I can go into manage rules or new rules and add some actually very complex formulas, but it really exceeds what we're trying to do here. For this, all we really want to do is highlight a cell if something is less than 60. So I'm going to go to highlight cell rules, go to less than. It's automatically going to populate your median number, which in this case is 60.5. We only want the 60 in here, and it's saying that format cells that are less than 60. So anything less than a 60 is going to be automatically formatted with a light red fill and dark red text. We can click on the drop down here and we can see that we do have a bunch of different options that we can use. Typically, red is associated with bad, green is associated with good, and we'll get to that green in a minute as well. So I can press OK. And to show you one more time how this works, we can select the same data range, and we can actually apply multiple conditional formats. And what I want to do is highlight anyone who has a 100. So a 100 is the maximum that you can receive in each category. So I'm going to go to equal to, and I'm going to put in 100 here. Now, if I were to press OK, everything that is 100 or is less than 60 is going to be highlighted in red. So I want to make sure that we have some meaning to the colors that we're using. So for the 100, because that's as good as it gets, we can select our green fill with dark green text. And now we can see by pressing OK that if I have someone who gets 100, it's automatically going to be formatted in green. And if I have someone who gets less than a 60, it's automatically going to be in red. So we also need to make sure that the total score is at least 180. So I'm going to select my total score, go to conditional formatting, and I want to highlight anything that is less than 180. And I press OK because nothing here is less than 180. Nothing is actually showing up. And for body mass index, I actually want to format this as a percentage. So if I select that little range here and I click on the percent style, it's automatically going to add 2 decimal places to whatever I have in here because it thinks that it is converting it from a fraction to a percentage. So the best way to do that is to format it as a percentage first, and by clicking delete, I'm clearing out only my contents and not my format. So I can go to 4, 17, and I'm just kind of selecting random numbers here. And now we have our percentages. And I want to find out, let's just select 23 as a cutoff point. So I want to figure out if anyone is above 23, because being above that BMI is what is a negative for these for this particular criterion. So I can go to conditional formatting. I can go to highlight cells and rules. And I want to look for anyone who's greater than 23%. So I'm going to put 23 in there and press OK. And you can see that nothing really happened here. And that's because this is formatted in percents. And I'm going to press undo and go back in here. And we're going to look again at greater. So because we have a percent here, we need to make sure that we also have a percent here because it is looking for exact matches and letting us know whether or not something is true. So we want to make sure, once again, that this is percentages and this is also a percentage and that we are greater than 23%. And obviously Vince Wilfork is looking like he's in a little bit of his heavier time frame here. He's at 42%. And one of the things that I want to point out is that you can actually receive a total score that passes the APFT, even though we have individual criteria that would make us fail. So we need to make sure that we are under 60 here. under 23 here and over 180 here. If I were to go to Vince Wilfork and say that he got a 20 in each event, actually we only needed to do one, you can see automatically that that's going to bring us into a total score of 156, and it's being highlighted in red because it is lower than our conditional format of 180. So the advantage to this really is to help us draw attention to important pieces of information. And when we're looking at something that is very kind of complex like this, where we need to have certain things here, a certain thing here, and a certain thing here, and all these different types of criteria, it's really, really easy to start making mistakes. And we can make mistakes, number one, within our calculations. We can make mistakes within our data entry. We can make mistakes by missing one, because if I were to clear all of these conditional formats, I'm going to go down to clear rules, and I want to clear rules from my entire sheet. Now I'm just back to an endless sea of numbers that is really easy for me to overlook something. So I'm going to click on Control Z so that we can see one more time that we do have a visual aspect to all of this information that makes it a little bit more meaningful. It makes it more accurate, and it definitely takes up a lot less time to do it this way. As always, I welcome you to reach out to me with any questions. I hope that this gives a little bit of a better understanding to the conversation starter that I used, and shows you how this particular feature can benefit you. Take care, everybody.